Hi everyone, Holthany Breath Tano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of the new Iglooghost album, Neō Wax Bloom. This is the latest full-length album from UK-based music producer Mr. Iglooghost, who I first heard 2 years ago when he made his Brainfeeder Records debut with the Chinese New Year EP, which was an incredible, overwhelming, mind-bending collection of tracks. Insane production that combined the rich, jazzy, and textured sound play of Flying Lotus with the kaleidoscopic electronic mayhem that typically comes out of the PC music camp. And for a young producer, he seems to have a deep appreciation for some of the older styles of electronic music to come out of his home country in the 90s, like drum and bass and drill and bass. And the detail in the tracks on this EP, I mean, it's incredible. The rhythms are explosive, the melodies and harmonies are layered beautifully. Igloo's music is just maximal to the max and as puzzling and colorful as a 10 by 10 Rubik's Cube. And on top of that, he conceptualizes his music as like being the soundtrack to a jelly squiggly worm wearing a witch's hat going through different dimensions or something. At least that's what I remember him saying in a podcast I did with him. Now, after just hearing a handful of tracks on this EP, I was convinced that Iglooghost could become one of the most enigmatic and creative producers out there. And I'm happy to see that that prediction pretty much came true with the material that he delivers here on his new record. Now, he teased toward this album with quite a few singles. The song Peanut Choker landed on his Little Grids EP last year, and again, it's also featured here. We also have the tracks White Gum and Bug Thief and Solar Blade, and these songs are multicolored, they're frantic, they're really intense, but the more I listened to them, the more it seemed like there was a very coherent method to Iglooghost's madness. And it may not seem like it on the surface, the constantly bustling and shuffling and tangled rhythms. At first, they kind of sound the way that a really difficult and long-winded trigonometry equation on a blackboard looks. But like candy, there's something really sweet about what Igloo does with his music. It's really invigorating, and it just kind of keeps beckoning me back to decipher it, like I'm, I don't know, mapping out a human genome or figuring out the equation for time travel. And while these tracks are dense, there are musical and sonic components and themes that shine out in every song. Like on Super Ink Burst, which features these rich and wailing saxophone leads. The sound is so raw, it's so live, it's mixed so perfectly. The way the sax kind of intertwines with the very intense rhythms, it almost reminds me of like some old school, very aggressively performed bebop jazz. Or the delicate and beautiful chord progressions on the song Bug Thief that eventually give way to some glistening and dancing synth leads. The plucky Sour Patch flavored guitars on the song Zen Champ really pop out to my ears, as well as the very speedy and chugging rhythms here. It kind of reminds me of like a steam engine going at light speed. And there are a good handful of cuts on here that feature this very fast, chipmunked rapping, so fast you can't really decipher a lot of what's being said. It's really just kind of another sound to be added into the insanity. Solar Blade and White Gum being my two favorite examples of this. The latter of those two kind of feels like a grime song thrown in a hyperdrive. And as long as we're talking about rapping, it's nice to hear Iglooghost continuing to collaborate with Mr. Yoti, who appears on the second half of the track Teal Yomi/Olivine. Now, while these songs do throw a lot at you structurally speaking, there are some peaks and valleys, there are well-crafted intros and outros. The musical and rhythmic progressions do become clearer with each listen. It's not like Iglooghost is simply just beating listeners over the head with a merciless barrage. And moments in the track listing like Purity Shards kind of serve as a nice short little interlude-type breather amongst all of these very zany bangers. As does the song Infinite Mint featuring Koosh, who I wish sung a little bit more boldly on the track. Her vocals do tend to get sort of drowned out by the very vibrant instrumentation through much of the song, though I do, in theory, enjoy her breathy singing approach here. And there's something about her singing style and Igloo's production on this track that just reads to me as having a giant Bjork influence. Like, it would be amazing to hear those two link up at some point. And I'm not sure what else to say. I mean, it's a pretty solid listen. It's a tight 40 minutes, and there are tons of quality tracks here. I think it is a very formidable full-length debut for Brainfeeder Records, but as a new and an emerging artist, I still think there's room for improvement. This thing is inventive, it's sharp, it's idiosyncratic, it's unique, it's bold, and I still think Iglooghost is on track to become a one-of-a-kind artist. I think the record could have had a little bit more attention paid to flow, could have had a bit more attention paid to stylistic diversity. The constantly jittery vibe of these instrumentals does reach a formulaic peak toward the end of the record. It's a bit front-loaded as well, and cuts like Peanut Choker do not sound quite as cutting edge and as refreshing and as big time as a lot of the more recently released material on this thing. The subtler moments here were 100% necessary, but did not feel quite as essential as the more aggressive highs. I guess it's maybe more of a blind spot for Igloo at this point. Like finding ways to craft tracks that are just as captivating as Solar Blade, but while executing a bit of restraint. Overall, really impressed with this album, scratched pretty much all of the itches I expected it to, and looking forward to what Iglooghost is doing in the future for sure. I'm feeling a light 8 on this thing. Transition, have you given this album a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best, you're the best. What should I do next? Hit the like if you like, please subscribe, and please don't die. Just, you know, drink your water, eat your fruits and veggies, all that stuff, get a good night's sleep. And over here next to my head is a review for the Iglooghost EP that I reviewed before this, or you can click on the link to subscribe to the channel. I'll see you guys in the next one forever.